Good afternoon. Final stretch of Agile on the beach. We're nearly there. Time to go home or to go and hit the pub again. So I hope everybody had a time that was very enjoyable yesterday at the beach party and beyond. I had a brilliant time, so I was very glad that this wasn't at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was totally powered by tribute. So my name's Rose Ross, and I'm the co-founder and co-conspirator of TechBritannia. My colleague and co-founder is over there, Eric. So I'm just going to say that he actually wrote the presentation, so if it's crap, it's his fault. So, yeah. So obviously we're delighted to be here at Agile on the beach, and I wish that the notifications weren't popping up on the sky. So opportunity to spend half an hour talking about British technology. Some very exciting things happening in that space. So thanks for taking time. I know there's some really good other sessions on at the moment, so I really appreciate you coming here to spend a little bit of time finding out about this. But I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself, if you don't know me already. My career has been in technology PR. I've been doing that for a few years. And so I work with high-tech companies, so usually enterprise tech versus consumer, but we've kind of done that. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I set up a technology award for startups. It's a global thing called the Tech Trailblazers. And the idea behind it, the inspiration behind it, was really that I'd worked with a lot of startups, and I was quite frustrated for them that there were a lot of awards that were focused either on tech startups, and they would be competing with this is the best app to walk your dog with. And also ones which looked at enterprise tech, but then you were usually up against big players. So if you look at storage, you look at EMC and NetApp, and they would always kind of take all the accolades at the end of the day. So that was sort of a little bit of a spin-off from my earlier career. And then Eric and I bumped into each other at a trade show, and we were talking about both going to San Francisco the following weekend. I'm like, oh, VA, Saturday? He goes, yeah, I suppose at 12 o'clock. He goes, no, I'm on an early flight. So no, we should have had breakfast and had a chat beforehand. But anyway, so I got a message from him later which said, oh, actually, I'm on the same flight to France. And that's when he started talking about his idea for what eventually becomes TechBritannia. So anyway, so TechBritannia is a new site, very community focused, very new. We actually launched in June. But then people go, well, why do you need another site that talks about tech? I mean, aren't there enough? You've got TechCrunch, you've got Gigone that's just come back again, you've got all the nationals cover tech, and then you've got Computer Weekly, etc., etc. Well, one of the things that we felt was that people are actually interested in what's going on around them. So, you actually choose brands that match your values. And I think most people in Britain actually are kind of quite patriotic in a good way and would like to see more attention being put on the tech that's actually happening here in the UK. And also that there is a little bit of a misconception about what people in technology look like. And obviously, I think most of us would say we consider ourselves being in the tech industry, and I don't really see anybody who looks quite like that. So the hipster sort of perception, and oh, we're in Shoreditch, man, we've got lovely, expensive coffee shops here, which is great. There's lots of exciting stuff happening in London, but we felt, obviously me being brought up in Cornwall and the adopted daughter of the fantastic county here, and Eric coming from Middlesbrough and spending a lot of time in Yorkshire, we knew that there was a lot of stuff going on about. I've been to Agile. It's my 3rd time, so I kind of knew that there was a lot going on outside of the London scene. So we don't just look at IT, we look at clean tech and biotech. We wanted to look at the technology pillars of the UK where we're particularly strong. And there's something like 2.5 million people who work in the tech industry. Now they're not all tech vendors per se, that probably includes IT departments and stuff like that. But you're still looking at a significant number of people, and only about 20% of those are actually based in London. So we wanted to kind of take TechBritannia and sort of, not turn the tables on London, but sort of widen the scope of what people are actually thinking about. And another thing that we wanted to really look at was the gap between academia. There's some amazing research going on, which doesn't always get commercialised, which is a shame. So if you look at the map, Obviously, we wanted a big dot around London, and there's nothing down here in Cornwall, which is because the map is wrong. But you can see there are hotbeds all over the UK. So that's what we say. We say we are TechBritannia, so everybody in this room, because you work in tech, is part of what we're trying to achieve. And we want to fly the flag for British tech. So actually look specifically at British technology companies, so tech that's being made, developed, coded in the UK, but also people who are British, who are perhaps doing something in Silicon Valley or over in India or Australia. So there just needs to be a British link somewhere in there. So when we kicked things off, we actually did an accelerator or a pre-accelerator programme last year in London, obviously, because that's where we're actually based. And we decided that we wanted to really explore what the startup journey was, because we're effectively a startup. I thought if we're writing and looking at people in that space, we would like to really understand their pain and also the excitement around the whole thing. So we looked at that, and one of those things is obviously in tech now, a big part of that has become crowdfunding. A lot of things that wouldn't have happened without that way of financing is now happening because of this, Kickstarter, Crowdfunding UK, all this great stuff. And we thought, well, let's not crowdfund the site, because that kind of sounds a little bit lame, like we haven't got any money to run it. So let's do something a little bit sort of innovative and, a bit agile. And so we came up with the idea of the Tech Torch Tour, which is, here is our first outing of the Tech Torch Tour here in Cornwall. And we also did some other stuff, which I will just like to tell you about, which is very exciting. So we did all that stuff. This is about crowdfunding, that's not interesting. But we thought, being a PR girl, I thought we've got to be a bit Richard Branson about this, make a bit of a splash, do something a little bit different. So in early June, we decided we would do a bit of a Phileas Fogg in a techie sort of way. So rather than going around the world in 80 days, we decided we'd go around the Tech Nation in 80 hours, which is why we have our tour t-shirts. So on June the 9th, we kicked off in Jersey, and then we flew to Bristol. Then we got a train to Cardiff, we went back to Bristol, flew to Glasgow, then we flew to Belfast, then we flew to Newcastle, then we drove to Cambridge, drove to Norwich, and drove into London in 78.2 hours, which was one of the craziest things, definitely the craziest thing I've ever done from a work perspective. It was a hell of a lot of fun. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we learned on the way, because it was quite a little adventure for us. So, when we started in Jersey, Jersey is obviously the most southern, and that's what we said. Let's try and go as far south, as far west, as far north, and as far east as we possibly can to visit the tech hubs where things are happening. So, we were invited by Digital Jersey to come and visit them. They've got a really nice space down there. There's actually quite a lot happening down there, and there's also, I think one of the exciting things, obviously they're a little bit of an anomaly from not being officially part of the UK. Big financial centre, so you're seeing a lot of stuff happening in, financial services, applications, mobile apps, that type of thing. So very innovative there, and quite a thriving but small startup community. I think one of the things we picked up from Andy Jarrett, who heads up Digital Jersey, is that the willingness to look outside of where they are and what they're doing and connect with other people doing the same thing, so you can learn, share ideas, maybe put some connections in place which benefit both parties. So that was a great thing that we learned there. When we went to Bristol, we spent a couple of hours with some people who were looking at crowdfunding. So we thought we'd start our crowdfunding this morning, so what better to do in the evening than go to an event about crowdfunding? So that was really interesting to look at how people had kind of got their campaigns together, what their challenges they saw, and that type of thing. And certainly from the Bristol perspective, what we started to see, because Bristol's quite a big tech hub, we weren't specifically talking about tech there, it was all about crowdfunding, but there was a willingness for them to be positioned with Cardiff as sort of like a hub together to strengthen their position. So I thought that's interesting. So that's, Jersey said they want to connect, Bristol said they want to connect. See a little pattern going here. So we then got the train to Cardiff, and then very early morning we went to the Doctor Who experience. No, we didn't, hang on, we didn't quite go to Doctor Who experience. We were past the Doctor Who experience and met in this really lovely location on the bay, and met with 2 or 3 of the local sort of entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, and they didn't look like Pip's boy. They looked like middle-aged guys, as it happened. Both really interesting stories, and you could really hear the passion and the community spirit. Both were very, very connected to, being in Cardiff, very proud of what was being achieved there. We had also Cardiff government who were sort of very supportive of the idea of trying to promote themselves and making people understand what they had to offer. So with their very amazing sports facilities, they're seeing a lot of opportunity for them in health, apps and sports tech. So that's more wearables, that kind of thing. So that was very interesting. And again, a willingness to sort of look at, the wider community of the UK as well. So they went to Glasgow, went to Startup Grind up there, and then there was another entrepreneur who was talking about his journey, what had gone wrong, what worked really well. But what you found, there was not always the same thing. There was always a passion and always something that sort of sparked those people when they were doing what they were doing. So for Belfast, we went to the Northern Ireland, I'm taking too much time on this now, Northern Ireland Science Park, and again we met some amazing people there. Well, in fact, it was just an amazing experience, although very tiring. Newcastle, again, we spent some time in the startup space there called Campus North, which was really, really good fun. We just sat around and put tattoos on people, which was good fun. And unfortunately, I didn't bring any with me, which is a bit of fun. So things sort of changed a little bit when we drove down to Cambridge late overnight, and then met up with the guy who heads up PR and branding for ARM. So that was really interesting because they are a little bit of a superstar in the British tech scene, obviously. I'll be talking a little bit about them later on. Norwich, we had a great experience because we spent time in the lounge, the coffee lounge in Norwich. East Anglia University? No, UEA, yeah. And that was like stepping into some kind of vortex. Because after all the energy and excitement of all the startup people, you get into academia, well, I've got this bit of open source code, it does really cool stuff, so you're going to commercialise it? Yeah, you do that, just leave it to the community. So lots of exciting stuff that they were doing there, but you can definitely see the difference between the people who are doing stuff in the commercial world and the people who are researching things. And that brought home to us the idea of how important it was for us to look at academia, look at how you can bridge the gap between the two worlds. Cool, so that's what we do, and that's what we write about. Well, that's what Eric and his gang write about. So, British technology, or Britons in technology, doing stuff either in the UK or elsewhere. So, what I thought I'd do is I'd kind of highlight some of the things that maybe people don't know. And I just thought, who's from Cornwall? Here, anybody have up if you're from Cornwall? Okay, so not quite, so about 35%. Okay, anybody here from, sorry?
Live here, not born here.
So that's okay, I'm not. That's
Oh, it's
fine.
Cornish.
3 generations, we've got my I know, I never be accepted.
Friendly lot.
So anyway, so anybody here from outside of London? Okay. Where are you from? Devon.
No,
Well, that's almost Cornwall. That's almost Cornwall. We've got a bridge.
near enough.
Reading?
Tunbridge Wells.
Tunbridge Wells. Everybody else from London? Cool. Great. It's a nice spread. Nice spread. So if you don't know this, there is actually the beginning of the internet. Well, I call it the beginning of the internet because the telegraph system actually, the first cables were laid out at Porth Curnow, which is very close to the Minute Theatre, a beautiful cove. And I consider that the beginning of that type of network. Obviously, technology is different, but the concepts are very much the same. And if you do have time, and if you're either local or not local but staying around, I would very much recommend going and paying a visit. It's very, very interesting. And of course, Cornwall has other tech claims to fame. We've got Marconi, all of his wireless stuff was done down on the visit. We've got obviously the most connected county in the UK. And then we've got this bloody brilliant conference out on the beach. Yeah, I mean, what more do you need? Just great examples of the fact that there's not just, there's tech life outside of London. Well, I thought I'd have a look at a few people. So we've got obviously the internet, just talked about possibly telegraph system was the beginning of that sort of concept. And then of course there is a very famous Briton who gave us the weird wide web. Sir Berners-Lee. So obviously he's very famous and we definitely want to interview him. We haven't quite cracked it yet, have we, Eric? But we'll see how we get on. Close, always close. But, hang on, I'm missing someone. Okay, I didn't quite recreate it. So there's a little story, just a little sideline here. I started my presentation 2 hours before we kicked off, which was great, it's fine. Agile, just, I knew it was kind of in my head, just need to get down into death or PowerPoint. Unfortunately, there was a point in that process where I clicked don't save. Because I thought it was don't save the image, no, it was don't save the presentation. So it got recreated. So there should be another slide in between this one and the next one, which has a lovely picture of Sir Johnny Armive and an iPod, which is an example of another famous Briton who's obviously not in the UK but has made a massive contribution to the technology for us today. So just imagine that slide was there. There's also another not so famous Briton, and obviously if TechBritannia had been around at that time, I'm sure he would have been a lot more famous than he is. He's a gentleman called Kramer, who patented in 1981 the digital audio player, which, if you can see that, actually looks quite like an iPod, which Apple have actually admitted is the basis for what was going on there. And another thing you may not know, Connect technology was all invented at Microsoft Labs in Cambridge. Well, that's the rumour that we're trying to spread. Eric has some evidence, but we're not quite sure when we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. So I think we've always felt, and that's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing, is that we're always in the shadow of the good old USA. Silicon Valley is where it's at. If you want to raise money, if you want to be a unicorn, that's where you've got to be. But I don't think that's actually true. So if we look at our mobile phones, have we got a mobile phone? Want to look at your phone? Well, you won't find, in all probability, an Intel chip in that. You will probably find an ARM chip. So we're all carrying around British technology in our back pockets. And obviously, if you've got kids, or maybe if you don't, you just like to fiddle around with stuff, you've probably got a Raspberry Pi. So we have got some brands which are quite, but I mean, they're world leaders, no doubt about it. And there's more coming. If you look at the focus that the government has put on trying to get tech as one of its pillars for the economy, it's certainly seen as being the most important thing that they want to see, and we are seeing that, over the last sort of few years, that there are lots and lots of exciting ideas coming up, and I know on the table at the front there's one of them. So we are really excited about giving some, some airplay, some visibility to all of these great ideas. And of course, rock star moment, we're always looking for great stories. So if you know of great stories about technology in Britain, please let us know. I think that's kind of about it, unless does anybody have any questions?
I was wondering actually, if you consider the aeronautical industry, tech industry, because it's huge. Yeah.
Well, it's really expensive stuff, isn't it?
Well, it's still technology, isn't it? It's still stuff that we're inventing here, and it's computers and it's composites, and it's just huge. I remember doing some videos about it, and it's prolific in the southwest. And I just wondered if it's still tech.
What's this Bloodhound, is it? I think that's being done by the army.
But all the NASA engines are designed, all loads of NASA equipment's designed in the southwest.
Not just
Spaceships.
Rolls-Royce, you've got Rolls-Royce at Bristol, and there's a huge amount of engine management and software on the side of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a clean tech. I mean, obviously, Eric's the man on the editorials.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything, if it's having cheap, then we're interested, basically. So whatever industry that happens to be attached to, if it's innovation, then it's something worth talking about. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's just thought about it. That's what I just thought.
Yeah.
There are
Because I didn't know anything about it.
there are small consultancies which must have started in the last 10 years,
which provide little services like fatigue and damage tolerance analysis to companies that provide services to Airbus. So those might be good ones to focus on because their companies are about size of 15 employees or so, which do a lot
size
of
doesn't matter, it's what's going on.
which do a lot of work in support of the larger companies, which I have friends working with them, so it might be interesting.
Well, we're finding that quite a lot, that rather than have a research and development section, the larger companies tend now to be looking towards startups.
Yes.
I mean, it's quite brutal in its concept in that they can hire and fire without it costing them anything in redundancy fees and all of that.
How do you consider getting involved with young enterprise scheme in schools? Because kids are increasingly creating apps
Oh, yeah,
and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal because it's, the earlier you get people into this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's following quite a lot of things at the moment. We're looking at what's happening in the schools to try and encourage younger people to get into coding. We've been to quite a few hackathons, which becomes really interesting because you realise that there is a role developing for women in the coding area, because basically you could argue that the whole software industry started with Ada Lovelace and the women who did all the work during the war. Then suddenly the men seem to have taken over. But that's created a kind of male oriented software process, which, to get back to the Agile thing, there is a role developing that puts a different spin on software development. But there was one project at one of the hackathons I went to, which was actually Sabre. So we have looked at the aerospace kind of area. And the concept was from the woman on the team, who was not a coder, but they came up with a brilliant idea that business people travelling around the world, often they have carry-on baggage, even though they've got an allowance for hold luggage. Why not give that to a charity, one of the worldwide charities, when they want to move documents or pieces of equipment from one place to another? Why not give that to them free? And I think that's the kind of idea where I don't think the girls on that particular team would have thought about that. Most of the other teams were all male, and they were stitching services together and coming up with other sort of things, but this had a nice touch to it.
Diversity wins.
Well, I mean, my view around women in technology is really that because we're always just banging on about your code, that's just like digits now. And that just isn't an attractive proposition to not just girls, that's to boys as well. But what I read a story, it was on Facebook actually, it's kind of like a campaign called Mighty Girl about how, women are doing amazing things. And there was an example of a girl who had someone like her auntie or something had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And she started looking into how you diagnose and how you test for breast cancer. And she found that there were actually some really good tests that could be done quite easily. So she found a way of, in some way, putting that up onto the internet. So she taught herself to code, she taught herself Java and stuff like that. And I think what we're doing is we're trying to force people to code. What we need to do is, what do you want to do? What fires you up? What is the problem in the world that you want to solve? What is the thing you want to create? And then say, well, to do that, you might have to put a few lines of code together, and this is how you do it. Because I think what you do is, it's a bit like, do you like going fast down a country lane and flying around in the mud and having fun? Yeah, that sounds very exciting. No, what you have to do is you have to to learn to drive, because if you don't learn to drive, it's just really important that people drive. No, it is really important that people can code and they understand how it works. But also there are lots of roles in technology which aren't about coding. I think a lot of the people I speak to here, we talk about Agile, we talk about teams, we talk about leadership, and that's what we need. And I mean, we've got a little bit of a side project. Well, I've got a little bit of a side project. We've got a number of themes that we're also very focused on, and one of those is Agile. And I feel quite passionately that if we could take all of the Agile loveliness and sort of spread it around the tech industry into other parts, a little bit like Linda's been doing with being Agile in business. So, I mean, I run a tech PR company, but we do stand-ups. And we look at, well, obviously I'm Agile because I only do my presentation 5 minutes before I'm actually doing it. And I do think there is just a natural, being Agile is actually part of how humans have evolved, because we are Agile, we're able to adapt to things. We think on our feet, we communicate, we are tribal beings. And I think that actually if we roll all of the really good stuff that's applicable out into the wider sort of business community, we'd actually be what we should be, which is a technology powerhouse, and hopefully that would then filter into other industries as well. And I remember the first time I came to Agile, there was a guy who gave a presentation. Well, I didn't understand what he was talking about, obviously. But he did say something very, very interesting. He says, it doesn't matter how agile our team is, we are still operating in a non-agile environment, which means there's a limit to how much impact we can actually have on the business. And I guess that was one of the reasons why Belinda likes being agile in business. So, has anybody got any other questions? Yes?
I've got a couple. So, one other area, fintech, which you gave really good at,
Yes, yes. Transfer-wise,
Yeah.
which is a way of changing.
Yeah, some really good stuff happening there.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is you said you've been to all these different locations, and you said they were all kind of seem to be quite interested in grouping together and doing stuff. Was there any outcome from that?
Well, when we go to Jersey, Andy was saying he'd be quite keen, because obviously when we first started, we thought we would actually do sort of standalone events, which would talk about maybe IP or other stuff. What we're kind of doing for the first sort of outing is we're kind of piggybacking like we are here. So when we go to Jersey, it's National Coding Week and there's loads of stuff going on there. So we're going to do that sort of there, and then there's lots of fintech stuff happening there. From a fintech perspective, there's also Level 42. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's in Canary Wharf, which is very much focused on fintech and retail tech. It's like a space for startups in that sort of arena. You'll see that all the banks are starting to do stuff, like there's the Barclays. What's the Barclays program called again?
Digital Eagles? Is it the Digital Eagles one?
No, it's different from that. There's an incubator, the Barclays one. In Shoreditch, not Shoreditch, out towards Jack River one. Anyway, they're seeing, I mean, that's a big part is the financial world is to do that. So, I'm going to watch on time. Yeah, I'm over, so if you need to go, please feel free to do so. And do pop round to us and say hi and yeah, so fintech's a big opportunity for you, sure, definitely.
As we're going around, we're obviously making contacts. It's something I've been a journalist for 30 years, like that, and as a sort of